He smirked and told the room, "This is Maria, my maid. She just helps around the house," while she stood there swallowing the shame. People laughed. Cameras flashed. Then the CEO walked in, glanced at her, and said one sentence that froze Clifford's blood. Because the maid he mocked was about to step on that stage, and his whole life was about to crack in public. "Please, sit back, relax, as we dive fully into this really remarkable story." Clifford sat at his desk, staring at the email glowing on his laptop screen as if it were a ticket to another life. Whitmore Holdings' annual black tie gala, invitation only. His pulse quickened. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. 3 years of late nights, forced laughter at office jokes, and endless pretending to be one of them had finally paid off. An invitation to the gala meant he was being noticed, and in Clifford's world, being noticed was everything. "Maria," he called out, his voice echoing through their small but tidy apartment. The smell of jollof rice drifted from the kitchen, the soft hum of gospel music underscoring the domestic calm. She appeared a moment later, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Yes, honey?" Clifford turned his laptop toward her, grinning. "Look at this. The company gala. They invited me. You know what this means?" She smiled, genuinely happy for him. "It means they're recognizing your hard work." He nodded, but corrected her quickly. "It means I'm finally being seen, Maria, by the right people." She walked closer, peering at the elegant invitation design. "It looks fancy. I suppose you'll need a tuxedo." "And you'll come with me," he added, already picturing the night. "It's a couples event. Everyone brings their wives." Maria blinked. "Me? Of course. But don't overdo it," he said casually, reaching for his coffee mug. "You know how these corporate types are. I don't want them thinking I'm out of place." She tilted her head. "Out of place?" he sighed, setting the mug down. "You know what I mean? Just something simple, modest. You always look good when you keep it low-key." Her chest tightened. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. Maria had learned to translate his words. Modest meant, "Don't embarrass me." "All right," she said softly. "Something simple." As she turned to leave, Clifford's voice followed. "And Maria, when we get there, if anyone asks, just play along if I introduce you differently. Some of them are high society, and I can't explain everything about us in one night." Her steps slowed. "Differently? What does that mean?" He waved dismissively. "Nothing serious. Maybe I'll say you help with things at home, just until they get to know me better. It's a formality." Maria stared at him. "You mean, tell people I'm your maid?" Clifford's expression hardened. "Don't make it sound dramatic. It's just business etiquette. These people are judgmental. You wouldn't understand how corporate circles work." Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her tone calm. "I understand respect, Clifford, and pretending I'm your maid doesn't sound like respect." He sighed impatiently. "Maria, can you not make this a thing? Just one night. I'm trying to build a future for us. Once I'm promoted, everything will change." Her silence lingered between them. The music in the background seemed to hush. Finally, she nodded. "If that's what you need." He smiled, relief washing over him. "That's my girl." Later that night, Maria lay awake beside him. His steady breathing filled the dark room. She stared at the ceiling, thinking about how easily he had said it, how small he made her sound. Once Clifford had loved her simplicity. Now it seemed to embarrass him. She whispered to herself, "You'll see me one day, Clifford, for who I really am." But he was already asleep, dreaming of chandeliers and applause. The following week was a blur of preparation. Clifford bought a new tuxedo, spent hours polishing his shoes, rehearsing his introduction speech, and researching his boss's interests. Maria quietly ironed his clothes and watched. When she brought up what she might wear, he didn't even look up from his mirror. Something decent, maybe that beige dress from church, the long one. Simple, clean. She nodded and walked away. The night of the gala, rain threatened the horizon but never fell. Maria stood by the door in a sleek cream dress, her natural curls pinned neatly, her gold earrings catching the light. Clifford looked her over. Not bad," he said, straightening his cufflinks. "Let's go." She smiled faintly. "Thank you." The drive to the venue was long and quiet. Lagos glittered in the distance, lights bouncing off glass towers. Maria looked out the window, her thoughts distant. Clifford, rehearsing under his breath, didn't notice the way she clutched her hands together. When they arrived, cameras flashed at the entrance. Chauffeurs opened doors. Laughter, champagne, silk gowns, it was another world. Clifford adjusted his tie, his confidence swelling. "Remember what I said," he whispered. "Smile, stay polite, don't draw attention." She nodded. "Of course." He offered her his arm, but withdrew it halfway when a group of colleagues waved. "Clifford!" He grinned and walked ahead, leaving her a step behind. Maria followed quietly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Inside, the grand ballroom shimmered with gold and white. A live band played soft jazz. Waiters in black and white uniforms glided between tables carrying trays of sparkling drinks. Maria's breath caught, not at the luxury, but at the strange mix of warmth and coldness that came from people who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Clifford blended in easily, his laughter louder than usual. When a coworker asked who the lovely lady was beside him, he chuckled and said, "Oh, Maria? She helps me keep things together at home. My little house manager." The men laughed politely. Maria's smile stayed fixed, but her heart cracked silently. She excused herself for a moment, walking toward the refreshment area. As she passed a mirror, she caught her reflection, elegant but small in a world built on appearances, and somewhere deep down something began to awaken. The evening unfolded like a play Clifford thought he was starring in. He floated from group to group, shaking hands, exaggerating his importance in projects, and pretending to belong. Maria remained mostly on the sidelines, sipping juice and observing. She was neither bitter nor jealous, just quietly detached like someone watching a movie she'd already seen. At one point, a young woman with pearl earrings approached her. "Excuse me," she said kindly. "I couldn't help but notice your necklace. It's beautiful." Maria smiled. "Thank you. It was a gift from my late mother." The woman's eyes softened. "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm Lydia." "Maria?" They chatted briefly, and Lydia couldn't hide her surprise at Maria's eloquence. "Are you in real estate too?" she asked. Maria laughed softly. "You could say I'm familiar with the industry." Meanwhile, Clifford was across the room, trying to impress a senior partner named Collins. "I've been working closely on the Lecky expansion," Clifford boasted. "It's my proposal that really pushed things forward." Collins raised an eyebrow. "Really? Interesting. I thought Mr. Whitmore mentioned someone else was advising on that." Clifford waved it off. "I probably contributed more behind the scenes." Collins chuckled dryly and walked away. Clifford turned, spotting Maria chatting comfortably with Lydia and a few others. For some reason, it irritated him. He walked over, placing a hand on Maria's shoulder. "Sweetheart, can you grab me another drink?" Her smile faded slightly, but she nodded and left. As she walked away, one of the women whispered, "She's so graceful. Is she really his maid?" Clifford forced a laugh. "Ah, she just helps around the house, keeps things organized." They looked unconvinced. When Maria returned with the drink, she overheard the tail end of Clifford's conversation. She set the glass down carefully. "Your drink?" she said, her voice neutral. He looked up, startled by the chill in her tone. "Thanks." She turned and walked toward the corner, eyes glistening. Later, during dinner, the waiters began serving. The aroma of roasted chicken and spices filled the air. Clifford laughed too loudly at every joke. His insecurity had become a performance. "Clifford," one colleague teased, "you're on fire tonight. You'd think you owned the place." He grinned. "Maybe one day I will." Maria's gaze drifted toward the stage. Mr. Whitmore, the firm's CEO, had just arrived. The entire room seemed to brighten at his presence. Tall, gray-haired, and charismatic, he carried himself with effortless authority. Everyone rose slightly as he entered. Clifford nearly tripped in his haste to greet him. "Mr. Whitmore." "An honor, sir." Whitmore smiled politely. "Good evening, Clifford." His eyes flicked toward Maria, who stood quietly behind. Their gazes met, and something like recognition passed between them. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Maria inclined her head respectfully. "Enjoy the evening," Whitmore said, then moved on. Clifford exhaled, shaking his head. "You see that? He spoke to me. That's what I mean, Maria. Moments like that. Career-changing." She said nothing. As music resumed, couples began to dance. Clifford asked a coworker's wife instead of Maria, claiming she was too shy for these things. Maria stood by the balcony, looking out at the night sky. She wasn't angry anymore, just sad for what he had become. The man who once held her hand at bus stops now danced for validation. When she turned back, Mr. Whitmore was watching her from across the room. He smiled faintly. Then his assistant approached and whispered something in his ear. Maria caught a fragment. She's here? Whitmore nodded. Good. Clifford remained oblivious, too busy chasing approval. The night deepened, the music mellowed, and conversations grew intimate. Maria had retreated to a quieter corner, preferring silence to shallow chatter. But even there, whispers found her. That's her, someone murmured. The one Clifford said is his maid. Another replied, Maid? She carries herself better than half these women. Maria kept her posture calm, though each word stung. At a nearby table, Clifford was mid-conversation with Collins again. You'll see. Clifford said confidently, I'm ready for bigger responsibilities. I've proven my loyalty. Collins leaned back. Loyalty is good, but so is humility. Clifford forced a smile. Of course. Just then, Lydia reappeared beside Maria. You really do look familiar, she said. Have we met before? Maybe at a conference? Maria shook her head lightly. Perhaps you've read one of my papers. I used to write on property law and investment ethics. Lydia's eyes widened. Wait, you're Maria Fernandez? Maria smiled. I used to be. Before Lydia could ask more, a hush swept across the room. Mr. Whitmore had taken the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his deep voice commanding the hall. Thank you for being here tonight. Before we begin our awards, I'd like to acknowledge someone whose vision has shaped this firm's future. Clifford clapped enthusiastically, certain it was one of the senior partners. Whitmore continued, Our new international partnership owes its foundation to her keen insight and integrity. Tonight's host, my goddaughter, Maria Fernandez Whitmore. The room froze. Heads turned. Gasps erupted. Maria rose gracefully, her expression poised. Clifford's hands dropped. What? He whispered. Maria walked toward the stage, her cream dress flowing under the chandeliers. Every step echoed through Clifford's disbelief. On stage, she took the microphone. Thank you, Uncle, she began. I'm honored to stand here tonight. She smiled gently at the crowd. My journey with Whitmore Holdings began quietly, behind the scenes. I've learned that true leadership isn't about volume, but vision. Dignity, humility, and respect, those build stronger foundations than any skyscraper. Her eyes swept the room but didn't linger on Clifford. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding everything together. So tonight, let's toast to unseen strength. Applause thundered. Clifford sat motionless, face pale. The maid had just hosted the gala. Maria's speech ended with calm grace. Mr. Whitmore joined her, pride in his eyes. Cameras flashed. And at that moment, Clifford realized he hadn't just lost respect. He'd lost the one person who had truly seen him. Clifford's body refused to move, even after the applause started. He sat locked in his chair, as if the velvet cushion had turned to cement. His eyes stayed on the stage where Maria stood, calm, composed, and utterly unfamiliar in the way power changes the temperature of a room. The same Maria who washed his shirts, reminded him to eat, and listened to his complaints without interrupting, now held a microphone like it belonged to her hand. He swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, like he'd been chewing sand. Around him, the room came alive in a new way. Whispers, stares, sudden curiosity that moved like wind through expensive perfume. That's his wife? A man at the next table murmured. No, he said she was his. Another voice began, then stopped like the word had become too embarrassing to finish. Clifford's colleague Tunde leaned in, laughing under his breath in disbelief. Guy, this one pass you. Clifford didn't answer. He couldn't. His tongue felt too heavy for speech. On stage, Mr. Whitmore stood beside Maria with a pleased expression, like a man watching a carefully planted seed finally bloom. He patted her shoulder lightly and stepped aside, giving her the space. Not as a guest, as the center. Maria's voice carried again, smooth and steady. I know some of you expected a familiar face tonight, someone who's always up front, but I've learned something over the years. The strongest pillars are often the ones you don't notice. Her eyes swept across the crowd, not hunting for anyone, not begging for approval. They were simply present. Clifford's chest tightened. He felt like she could see every cruel thought he'd ever hidden behind a smile. She continued, and if tonight reminds anyone that dignity is not tied to job titles or social introductions, then I'm grateful. A few people clapped again, softer this time, as if unsure whether they were applauding a lesson they didn't want to admit they needed. Clifford's mind ran backward at a dangerous speed. Every moment he'd told her to dress down, every time he'd corrected her in front of others, every time he'd said, don't talk too much, like her voice was a liability. He heard himself from earlier. She helps around the house. The words punched him again. When Maria finished, the band resumed with a gentle instrumental, a sound meant to smooth the edges of the moment. Mr. Whitmore leaned toward her and said something that made her smile briefly. Small, private, controlled. Then she turned and stepped down from the stage. The crowd shifted like a tide, people standing and pivoting to catch her path. Several guests moved toward her immediately, hands out, eager. Maria, that was incredible. I had no idea you were involved with the firm. Your perspective is refreshing. Are you really Mr. Whitmore's goddaughter? Clifford watched as she navigated them with grace, answering politely without giving too much. She didn't cling to attention, but she didn't shrink from it either. And then she was walking toward him. For one hopeful second, Clifford thought she might stop, speak to him, give him a chance to explain. But she didn't. She passed close enough that he caught the faint scent of her perfume, something soft and clean, and still she didn't look at him. Not even a glance, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. That hurt more than any insult could have. Tunde slapped Clifford's shoulder lightly, half joking, half stunned. Omo, you're babe na big babe, you no-tell person? Clifford's voice cracked. I didn't know. Tunde's eyes narrowed. You didn't know, or you didn't ask? Clifford flinched. Across the table, Lydia, the pearl earring woman Maria had spoken with, looked at Clifford with quiet disgust, not dramatic, just disappointed. You introduced her as house help, Lydia said plainly, like stating a fact in a courtroom. Clifford's face burned. It wasn't. But there was no way to finish that sentence without sounding worse. A man Clifford recognized from finance, Collins, leaned closer, his voice low. Clifford, you know what the problem is? It's not that you didn't know who she was. It's that you were comfortable making her small. Clifford stared at him, breathing shallowly. Collins straightened his jacket and walked away like the conversation had already ended. Clifford finally pushed his chair back and stood, unsteady. His hands trembled. He scanned the room for Maria, his gaze frantic now. He saw her near Mr. Whitmore, speaking with two older investors. She smiled politely, nodding as they spoke. Then Mr. Whitmore laughed and said something in her ear. Clifford took a step forward. Another. His heart hammered as if trying to escape his chest. He had to speak to her. Had to fix this. Had to prove he wasn't the man he'd been all night, except he was. He reached the group, forcing a smile that felt like a broken mask. Maria, he said softly, can we talk? Please. Maria turned her head slightly. Her expression didn't change. No anger, no triumph, just composure. Clifford, she said, as if greeting an acquaintance. Mr. Whitmore's smile faded. His gaze landed on Clifford like a weight. Clifford, he repeated, with a tone that suggested he remembered every report, every complaint, every small arrogance he'd overlooked because Clifford delivered results. Clifford swallowed. Sir, I didn't know. I didn't know Maria was important, Mr. Whitmore supplied, eyebrow raised. Clifford froze. Maria spoke before he could drown further. Uncle, give us a moment. Mr. Whitmore studied her face, then Clifford's. He gave a slow nod. 2 minutes. His voice was calm, but the warning was clear. He walked away, leaving Clifford and Maria in a small pocket of air that felt suddenly colder. Clifford leaned closer, voice dropping. Maria, why didn't you tell me? Maria's eyes held his, steady. Why didn't you ask? He blinked rapidly. Of course I asked. I asked about your day. No, she cut in gently. You asked about your day. You talked at me. You told me what you needed. You didn't ask who I was. Clifford's throat tightened. I love you. Maria's gaze didn't soften. Love without respect becomes permission. He winced as if slapped. I was under pressure tonight. I wanted to impress them. I didn't mean it like that. Maria's voice remained calm, but each word landed with precision. Clifford, you didn't mean to humiliate me, yet you did it easily, like it was natural. That's the part that hurts. His eyes filled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I swear. I didn't. Maria glanced past him at the room, people still watching, pretending not to. She lowered her voice. This is not the place for a scene. You wanted to be respected in this room, remember? Then behave like it. Clifford's shoulders sagged. What do I do? Maria studied him for a long second. You leave early, she said. Not as punishment, as protection, for yourself. Because the longer you stay, the more you'll embarrass yourself trying to repair something you broke with ease. His lips trembled. Are you coming with me? Maria's answer was immediate, quiet, and final. No. Clifford felt the ground tilt. Maria, please. She took a slow breath. Go home, Clifford. We'll talk there. He clung to that small mercy. Okay, yes, we'll talk. Maria stepped back, turning smoothly as another guest approached her with a smile and an outstretched hand. In one motion, she became host Maria again, professional, graceful, untouchable. Clifford stood there, suddenly invisible, watching the room shift away from him like he was no longer worth the effort of attention. And for the first time that night, he understood what it felt like to be made small. Clifford drove home alone, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned pale. The city lights blurred slightly through his windshield, not because the road was unclear, but because his eyes kept watering and he refused to wipe them. He wanted to feel the sting. He deserved it. At home, he couldn't sit. He paced the living room, still in his tuxedo, tie loosened, jacket thrown over the couch like a defeated flag. He replayed Maria's words over and over. You didn't ask who I was, but he had asked. Hadn't he? What did you cook today? Did you pay the electricity bill? Why are you quiet? He stopped pacing. Those weren't questions about her. Those were questions about the version of her that served his life. The door opened an hour later. Maria stepped in quietly, heels in hand, moving like she didn't want noise to announce her. She looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, as if carrying disappointment had weight. Clifford rushed toward her. Maria, she lifted a hand. Not yet. He froze. She placed her heels neatly by the wall, then set her clutch on the table. Her movements were careful, controlled, like a woman who had learned not to let emotion knock things over. Clifford's voice came out rough. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Maria looked at him, and for a brief moment he saw something flicker, sadness, maybe, or memory. Then it steadied. It's late, she said. Sit. He obeyed immediately, perching on the edge of the couch like a student in trouble. Maria remained standing. You want to know why I didn't tell you, she said, so I'll tell you. But you'll listen, not interrupt, not defend, just listen. Clifford nodded quickly. Yes. Maria drew in a slow breath. Before I met you, I had a different life. He stared. I studied law, international property law, she continued. I worked with a firm abroad, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because it interested me. It's contracts, ethics, land rights, investments, the things that shape cities. Clifford's mouth opened slightly. He had never heard this. Maria's voice stayed even. My mother got sick, very sick, and I came home. I stepped away from that world because my mother didn't have anyone else. I became her caregiver. Clifford swallowed hard. Why didn't you ever? Her eyes sharpened. He shut his mouth. For 2 years, my life was hospitals, medication schedules, long nights, and the kind of quiet grief you don't talk about at parties. She paused, and her fingers tightened slightly around her own wrist. When she died, I felt empty, like I had served my purpose, and now I didn't know where to put myself. Clifford's eyes stung again. He had known her mother died, but he'd never asked what it did to her. He'd only said, sorry, and moved on because grief made him uncomfortable. Maria continued, around that time, Uncle Whitmore reached out. He had mentored me since I was young. He offered help, opportunities, but I wasn't ready. I wanted a normal life for a while, something quiet. Her gaze landed on Clifford. That's when I met you. Clifford's chest tightened. At the community center, he whispered, remembering. Maria nodded. You were volunteering because your company required community service hours. You were frustrated the whole time, but you still carried boxes and smiled when people watched. I noticed that. I thought you were trying. Clifford flinched. You were kind to me then, she said. You were gentle, you listened, you asked me questions, real questions. You made me laugh when I hadn't laughed in months. Clifford's eyes filled fully now. I was real, he whispered. I was. I believe you were, Maria replied. But somewhere along the way, you changed. She walked toward the window, looking out at the dark city. When we married, I didn't mention my past because I didn't want it to become the center of our love. I wanted to be loved without the weight of credentials, without people treating me differently because of status. Clifford's voice trembled. So you tested me. Maria turned slowly. I observed you. He nodded desperately, and I failed. Maria's silence answered. Clifford's head dropped. I didn't know you were involved with Whitmore Holdings. Maria's expression didn't soften. I didn't involve myself at first, but Uncle Whitmore would call sometimes, ask my opinion on ethics clauses, foreign partner structures, risk, small advice, quiet conversations. Clifford looked up, shocked. All those nights you said you were reading? You were working? Maria nodded. I started investing again, slowly. Not to compete with you, not to shame you, just to rebuild myself. Clifford's voice cracked. And the expansion deal? Maria's eyes held his. I advised on parts of it. I flagged issues early. I suggested safeguards. That's why Uncle Whitmore said I played a role. Clifford's hands covered his face. God. Maria's voice lowered. You know what's painful, Clifford? It's not that you didn't know I had accomplishments. It's that you assumed I didn't. You assumed my quiet meant emptiness. Clifford's shoulders shook. I was insecure, he whispered. I didn't want them to look down on me. Maria stepped closer. So you made me someone they could look down on instead. The room went silent. Clifford's voice came out small. I hate myself for that. Maria watched him, her face unreadable. Then she spoke, not cruelly, but truthfully. I don't need you to hate yourself. I need you to see yourself. Clifford wiped his face with trembling hands. Tell me what to do. Maria exhaled slowly. You stop performing. You stop using other people as props to feel big. He nodded rapidly. Yes, and you learn respect, she added. Not because you're scared of losing me, but because without it, you can't love anyone properly. Clifford swallowed. Are you leaving me? Maria held his gaze for a long time, and in that pause, Clifford felt every possibility. I don't know, she said finally. I'm not making dramatic decisions tonight. I'm tired. Relief and fear tangled in him. Okay. Maria walked toward the hallway, then stopped. One more thing. Clifford looked up quickly. I didn't expect to be humiliated tonight, she said. I expected maybe discomfort, maybe awkwardness. I didn't expect you to choose cruelty so easily. Clifford's face crumpled. Maria, She raised a hand again. Sleep, Clifford. And with that, she turned down the hallway, leaving him in the living room with his tuxedo, his shame, and the version of himself he could no longer pretend wasn't real. The next morning, Clifford woke to silence that felt heavier than noise. The sun spilled through the curtains, bright and ordinary, as if the world hadn't cracked open the night before. He sat up slowly, disoriented, then remembered everything at once. The gala, the stage, the applause, the way Maria looked through him like he was air. He stepped into the hallway and found the guest room door closed. Maria? He called softly. No answer. In the kitchen, he found a mug on the counter and the kettle still warm, like she'd made tea earlier and left without announcing herself. He looked around, searching for signs of normal life. Music, cooking smells, her humming. There was nothing. He checked his phone. Messages from colleagues flooded in. Tunde, Omo, you done scatter yesterday. Another coworker, hope you're good. That was wild. A senior associate, FYI, Mr. Whitmore wants apartmental meeting Monday. Clifford's stomach knotted. He tried to call Maria's phone, but it went unanswered. He sent a text instead. Can we talk when you're ready? I'm here. An hour passed. Then 2. Maria finally emerged, dressed simply in a white blouse and dark trousers, her hair pulled back neatly. She didn't look like Host Maria or House Maria. She looked like herself. Quiet power, quiet distance. Clifford stood immediately. Good morning, Maria nodded once. Morning. He swallowed. I made coffee. Thank you, she said, and poured herself a cup without looking at him. He hovered awkwardly. Are you going to work today? Yes. I can drive you. No. The single word landed like a closed door. Clifford's hands clenched at his sides. Maria, please, I know you're hurt, but shutting me out. She set her cup down gently. Clifford, I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting my peace. He blinked. So you're just done talking? Maria's gaze lifted. Calm, direct. We talked last night. You heard me. I heard you, he said quickly. And I want to fix it. Wanting isn't fixing, she replied. Clifford's voice rose slightly, desperation slipping out. I can change. Maria's expression remained steady. Then change. He took a step closer. Tell me what you need. Maria's eyes softened just a fraction, but her voice stayed firm. I need space to breathe without feeling like I'm responsible for your growth. Clifford's throat tightened. You're my wife. And I'm a person, she said quietly. Not your mirror, not your coach, not your emotional crutch. He flinched as if struck. I didn't know I was doing that. Maria picked up her phone and keys. That's the problem. You didn't know because you didn't look. Clifford followed her toward the door, panic rising. Are you leaving me? Maria paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm leaving this conversation for now. That's all I'm promising you. He swallowed hard. Where are you going? To the office, she replied. Whitmore Holdings. Clifford's chest tightened again, the reality still sharp. Are they talking about me? Maria looked back at him. Clifford, they're not obsessed with you. They're obsessed with results and character. Last night wasn't about you being embarrassed. It was about you revealing yourself. His eyes dropped. I'm sorry. Maria's voice softened slightly. I know you are. Hope sparked in him. Does that mean... It means I believe your regret is real, she said. But regret without growth becomes another performance. Clifford nodded, swallowing tears. I'll do the work. Maria studied him. Do it for yourself, because if you don't learn respect when nobody is watching, then it isn't respect. It's fear. He breathed out shakily. Okay. Maria opened the door. Before she stepped out, she added, And Clifford? He looked up quickly. Don't try to contact Uncle Whitmore. Don't try to explain yourself to your colleagues. Don't do damage control. He frowned. Why? Because it won't be about truth, Maria replied. It will be about your image. And your image is the very thing that made you cruel. Clifford's shoulders sagged. I understand. Maria nodded once and stepped out. The door closed behind her with a quiet finality that made the apartment feel twice as empty. Clifford stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. Then, slowly, he picked up his phone again and stared at it as if it contained the answer to who he was supposed to become. He searched for a therapist near him. He didn't overthink it. He didn't rehearse how he would sound. He just booked the earliest appointment. Later, when he arrived at work, the atmosphere felt different. Not hostile, worse. Polite, controlled. Like everyone had silently agreed to treat him like a man carrying something unpleasant. Tunde approached him near the elevator with an awkward half-smile. My guy, you day okay? Clifford nodded stiffly. I'm fine. Tunde's smile faded. Clifford, no vex, but you mess up. Big time. Clifford didn't argue. I know. Tunde studied his face. You really didn't know she was connected? Clifford's voice was low. I didn't know her. Not the way I should have. Tunde blinked, surprised by the honesty. Okay, that's deep. Clifford stepped into the elevator alone. His reflection in the mirrored wall stared back at him. Tired eyes, stiff posture, a man who had spent years acting like someone else. For the first time, he didn't try to straighten his face into confidence. He just looked. And when the elevator doors opened, he walked out quieter than he'd ever been. Not defeated, not dramatic, just aware. Because now he understood the real work wasn't winning Maria back. It was becoming the kind of man who would never again need to make someone smaller just to feel big. Clifford didn't see Maria until almost midnight. He sat on the edge of the couch in the dark living room, suit jacket folded on his lap like a guilty confession. He had turned off every light except the small lamp by the bookshelf, the one Maria liked because it made the room look soft. Tonight, it made the room look like it was waiting for a verdict. His phone lay face up on the coffee table, untouched since his last text. He had tried not to hover at the window. He had tried not to keep checking the door. But time moved slowly when you were scared of what silence meant. Every minute that passed felt like Maria was walking further away from him without taking a step. When the keys finally clicked in the lock, Clifford stood so fast his knees protested. The door opened and Maria stepped in quietly. Not rushing, not sneaking. Just entering her home with the calm of someone refusing to carry panic that wasn't hers. She didn't look at him at first. She slipped out of her shoes, placed them neatly by the wall, and hung her bag on the hook. Only then did she turn her head slightly, acknowledging that he was there the way you might acknowledge a chair in the room, present, but not central. Hi, Clifford said, voice dry. Hi, Maria replied, tone neutral. He took a step forward, then stopped. I wanted to make sure you got home safe. I did, she said. She walked toward the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and drank slowly. The small, ordinary sound of swallowing felt loud. Clifford watched her hands. They weren't shaking. That frightened him more than anger would have. How was work? He asked, clinging to something normal. Maria set the glass down. Productive. Clifford nodded like that answered everything. He hovered again, then blurted, I booked a therapy session. Maria's eyes lifted. Not impressed, not moved, just attentive. Okay. It's tomorrow morning, Clifford continued quickly, like speed could prove sincerity. I know it doesn't fix anything, but Clifford, Maria interrupted gently, don't sell your effort to me like it's a product. He froze. I'm not. You are, she said calmly. You're looking for an immediate reaction, a reward, a sign that you're already forgiven. Clifford swallowed hard. I just want you to know I'm trying. Maria nodded once. I see that you want to try. The words were careful. Not warmth, not rejection, just truth with boundaries. Clifford's chest tightened. Are you coming to bed? Maria's gaze held his for a moment. Not tonight. He blinked rapidly. Okay. She walked past him toward the hallway, but paused near the guest room door. I have an early morning. I'll be quiet, Clifford promised. Maria turned her head. Clifford, this isn't about noise. Then she went into the guest room and closed the door softly. No slam, no dramatic statement, just a click. Clifford stayed standing in the living room for a long time, staring at that closed door like it had swallowed something he didn't know how to get back. The next morning, Clifford dressed without making sound. He didn't spray cologne. He didn't hum. He didn't do any of the little things he used to do to feel like the house belonged to him. He stepped out and drove to the therapist's office with both hands on the wheel, heart pounding like he was going to court. The therapist was a calm woman named Dr. Harris who didn't let him hide behind big words. Within 10 minutes, Clifford realized how much he talked when he was scared. He tried to explain the gala, his job, the pressure, the image, the way people judged. He tried to make it sound complicated. Dr. Harris leaned forward slightly. Why did you choose to humiliate her instead of saying, this is my wife? Clifford stared at the floor. Because I didn't want them to judge me. So you offered her up to be judged instead, Dr. Harris said gently. Why? Clifford's throat tightened. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound died. Because it felt safer. Safer for whom? For me, Clifford whispered. Dr. Harris paused, letting the quiet do work. When did you learn that safety comes from making someone else smaller? That question followed Clifford for days like a shadow he couldn't outrun. He thought about his father. How his father used to adjust his cheap tie in the mirror and say, if you don't look important, nobody will respect you. Poor men must act rich or they will be stepped on. He thought about how, as a boy, he would watch his father laugh too loudly in rooms full of men who didn't take him seriously, and how his father would come home angry and kick at chairs, blaming the world. Clifford drove home from therapy that afternoon and saw Maria walking out of the building lobby with a colleague. Confident, calm, speaking as if she belonged anywhere. Clifford didn't call out. He watched from his car for a second, then looked away like he didn't deserve to witness it. That evening, rain started unexpectedly, heavy and stubborn. Clifford found himself at the Whitmore Holdings building because he had been called in for a brief meeting with his department head. He walked out afterward, feeling smaller than he'd ever felt at work. Not because anyone insulted him, but because nobody tried to comfort his pride. They spoke to him like a man who had revealed poor character, and now the only way forward was consistent improvement, not explanation. In the lobby, he saw Maria again. This time, she was alone, standing near the entrance, waiting as drivers pulled up. She looked tired, not broken, just human. Clifford hesitated, then stepped forward carefully. Maria. She turned her head. Clifford. It's raining, he said. Your driver, is he coming? He's stuck in traffic, Maria replied. She didn't sound helpless, just stating a fact. Clifford swallowed. Can I drive you home? Maria's eyes searched his face, not for charm, but for intention. Clifford held still, forcing himself not to talk too much, not to perform. After a moment, Maria nodded once. Okay. The word landed like a fragile bridge. Clifford opened the passenger door for her like a man trying to remember manners. Maria stepped in without comment. Clifford shut the door gently, then walked around to the driver's side, heart thumping like he had just been given a chance he didn't deserve. Inside the car, the silence returned immediately. Rain hammered the roof, the wipers cutting through the water in steady rhythms. Clifford drove slowly, careful, like sudden movement might scare something away. He wanted to speak. His mouth opened twice, then closed. He remembered what Maria had said, don't sell your effort like a product. Minutes passed. Maria stared out the window, face calm but distant. Streetlights smeared into gold streaks on the wet road. Clifford's hands tightened on the wheel. I'm learning things, he said quietly, testing the air. Maria didn't look at him. Good. Clifford's throat tightened. The therapist asked me something. She asked when I learned that safety comes from making someone else smaller. Maria's eyes shifted slightly, not toward him, but as if she heard the weight behind the sentence. Clifford's voice grew rough, and I realized I've been doing that for years, not just with you, with people at work, with anyone I thought could make me look weak. Maria's face remained composed. And what did you decide to do with that realization? Clifford swallowed. Sit with it, not defend myself. Maria finally turned her head a little, studying him. That's new. Clifford nodded, eyes burning. I'm sorry, Maria. She didn't respond immediately. The rain filled the gap. Then Maria spoke, voice soft but clear. Clifford, do you know what hurt the most at the gala? Clifford's breath caught. Tell me. It wasn't the word, she said. It was your ease. The way you said it, like it was normal, like it didn't cost you anything to reduce me. Clifford's eyes flooded. He blinked hard, focusing on the road. It did cost me, he whispered. I just didn't feel it until it was too late. Maria watched him for a second longer, then looked back out the window. That's the tragedy of arrogance, she said quietly. It numbs you before it destroys something. They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It wasn't punishment. It was space where something honest had finally been placed on the table without drama. When they reached the apartment, Clifford parked and turned off the engine. The rain had softened. Maria unbuckled her seatbelt. Her hand rested briefly on the door handle, then she paused. Clifford didn't move. He waited. Maria spoke without looking at him. Thank you for the ride. Clifford's voice cracked. You're welcome. Maria stepped out, walked toward the building, then stopped and turned slightly. Clifford, he looked up quickly. Don't confuse small progress with finished work, she said. But keep going. Then she went inside. Clifford sat in the car after she left, staring at the steering wheel as tears finally fell. Not loud sobs, just quiet release. Because for the first time since the gala, he felt something real. Not hope of getting Maria back, gay, but the beginning of becoming a man who didn't need to borrow dignity by stealing it from someone else. The next week stripped Clifford down in ways he didn't expect. Therapy wasn't dramatic, it was uncomfortable. It was slow. It was sitting in a chair while someone asked questions that felt like lights turning on in rooms he'd kept locked. At home, Maria kept her distance with discipline. She wasn't cruel. She didn't shout. She didn't throw his mistakes at him. She simply stopped cushioning him from consequences. Clifford noticed the absence of small kindnesses. The way Maria used to automatically refill his water bottle, the way she used to remind him of meetings, the way she used to ask if he had eaten even when she hadn't. Now she moved through the apartment like a woman protecting her energy, and Clifford realized how much he had been living off her quiet labor without calling it what it was. One Saturday morning, Clifford found Maria in the kitchen making tea. He hovered near the counter like a man waiting for permission to exist. Maria didn't look up. You have something to say? Clifford swallowed. I've been thinking about my father. Maria's hand paused briefly at the kettle. Go on. Clifford's voice was low. He used to tell me, poor men must act rich to be respected. Maria poured hot water into a cup with steady control. And you believed him, Clifford nodded. I didn't just believe him. I built my personality around it. He rubbed his face. He used to come home angry, blaming people for treating him like he didn't matter, and I told myself I'd never be that man, but I became something worse. Maria turned slightly, watching him. Worse how? Clifford's eyes filled. He wanted respect. I wanted worship. Maria's gaze didn't soften into comfort. It softened into understanding. There was a difference. And worship makes you cruel, she said quietly. Clifford nodded. Yes. That afternoon, Clifford caught himself doing something old. A neighbor greeted Maria warmly in the hallway, complimented her confidence, her grace. The neighbor didn't even look at Clifford at first. Clifford felt the familiar irritation rise. The old instinct to reclaim attention, to assert importance. He almost spoke sharply. Almost. Then he remembered the rain-soaked ride home. He remembered Maria's words, "Don't confuse small progress with finished work." So Clifford breathed in and did something unfamiliar. He stayed quiet. He let Maria be seen without trying to compete with it. Later that night, he stood in the bathroom, staring at his reflection. The light above the mirror made his face look harsher than usual. He studied the lines near his mouth, lines carved by forced confidence. He studied his eyes, tired, afraid, hungry. He heard Dr. Harris's voice in his mind. When did you learn safety comes from making someone else smaller? He whispered to his own reflection, I'm sorry, but the mirror didn't forgive him. When he walked out, Maria was in the living room reading, legs tucked beneath her. She looked peaceful in a way that made him realize peace was something she had to fight for in their marriage. Clifford sat at a distance, careful not to invade. Can I ask you something? Maria didn't look up immediately. Speak, Clifford swallowed. Do you think you ever loved me? Or did you just love the man you thought I was? Maria's eyes lifted slowly. They were calm, but there was pain behind them. Old pain that had been patiently stored. I loved you, Maria said. The version of you that existed when nobody was watching. Clifford's chest tightened. And now? Maria closed her book. Now, I'm not sure who you are. Clifford nodded, jaw trembling. I don't think I knew either. Maria studied him. Clifford, do you know why I didn't fight you at the gala? Why I didn't correct you when you said those things? Clifford's voice was small. Why? Because I wanted to see what you would do when you thought you had power, she said. And you showed me. Clifford winced as if struck. I hate that I did. Maria's voice remained steady. Hate is easy. Change is hard. Clifford's tears spilled. He wiped them quickly, ashamed to cry like a child. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. Maria's face didn't change. I don't want to lose myself, she replied. That sentence stopped him. Because it wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. Clifford nodded slowly. Tell me how to not make you feel like you have to protect yourself from me. Maria watched him for a long moment, then spoke carefully. You start by listening without arguing. You stop explaining your intentions like they erase your impact. You stop needing me to be your proof that you're a good man. Clifford whispered, Okay, Maria continued, voice quiet but firm, and you respect me in private the same way you would respect me on a stage. Because if your respect changes depending on who is watching, then it isn't respect. It's fear of embarrassment. Clifford's throat tightened. You're right, Maria stood. I'm going to bed. Clifford looked up quickly, hope flickering. Your room, or Maria's eyes held his. My room, she said calmly, and walked away. Clifford sat alone, staring at the spot where she'd been. He felt the ache of what he had broken, but for the first time, he also felt clarity. Maria wasn't waiting for a performance. She was waiting for a man who could stand in front of his own reflection and admit the truth without needing applause. Change didn't arrive as a dramatic moment. It arrived as a series of small choices that bruised Clifford's ego every day. He kept therapy. He stopped skipping sessions when work got busy. He started writing in a notebook like Dr. Harris suggested. Honest notes, not motivational quotes. He wrote the ugly parts, the jealousy, the need for control, the way he enjoyed feeling superior. One entry read, I used Maria like a shield. Another read, I don't know how to feel small without panicking. Dr. Harris asked him to volunteer somewhere weekly. Not for public image, not for guilt, but to practice seeing people without ranking them. Clifford chose a shelter not far from the community center where he and Maria had first met. On his first day, he wore simple clothes and tried to stay unnoticed. A woman at the front desk handed him gloves. Bathroom duty, she said. If you're too important for that, tell me now so I can give the gloves to someone else. Clifford's cheeks burned. The old him would have smiled and found an excuse. This time he nodded. I'll do it. He scrubbed floors and cleaned sinks until his back ached. Nobody praised him. Nobody called him sir. He went home that night exhausted and strangely humbled. When he told Maria he'd started volunteering, she didn't clap or soften. She just nodded and said, Good. At first, Clifford wanted her to notice. Wanted her to say, I'm proud. Then he started noticing something uncomfortable. He had built his whole life on being rewarded for basic decency. So he learned to do the work without expecting a prize. Meanwhile, Maria moved forward with her own life. Clifford saw it from a distance. Her schedule changed, her wardrobe shifted slightly, her posture became even more grounded. She took calls in the living room sometimes, voice calm and professional. She wasn't trying to intimidate him. She was simply stepping back into herself. One evening, Maria came home and placed a folder on the table. Clifford's body tensed automatically, remembering old moments where papers meant control. Maria spoke calmly. Uncle Whitmore wants me to lead a mentorship program for young women entering the industry. Clifford nodded carefully. That's amazing. Maria studied him for a second. You don't sound threatened. Clifford swallowed. I am, he admitted quietly. But I'm trying to sit with it instead of turning it into something ugly. Maria's face softened slightly, not into forgiveness, but into recognition of effort. That's growth, she said. Clifford's throat tightened. He wanted to rush toward her, wanted to beg, wanted to hold on to that word like it meant he was saved. But he stayed still. He let it be what it was. Weeks turned into months. The apartment became less tense, though not intimate. Maria sometimes shared small updates, nothing deeply personal, but not cold either. Clifford learned to respond without trying to steer the conversation back to himself. One afternoon, Clifford found out Maria was speaking at a professional event on ethics in real estate investment. His first instinct was to show up and make himself visible, to prove he supported her. Then he remembered, support isn't a spotlight, so he attended quietly. He sat at the back in simple clothes and hands folded, listening. Maria stood on stage, voice calm and powerful, speaking about dignity in business, about transparency, about how people hide behind titles to excuse harm. Clifford felt every word like it was aimed at his old self. When the event ended, people clustered around Maria, praising her. Clifford didn't approach. He didn't want to steal even a second of her moment. He left instead, walked outside into the evening air, and sat in his car with his chest tight. He pulled out a small card from his wallet, wrote slowly, and left it with the front desk attendant for Maria. The note read, I'm learning, not to win you back, but to become someone worthy of loving. He drove home before she arrived. When Maria got home later, she held the note in her hand for a long time. Clifford watched her from across the room, afraid to speak. Maria finally looked up. Her eyes were softer than he'd seen in a long time. For the first time, she smiled. Not big, not dramatic. Just a quiet lift at the corner of her mouth, like a woman allowing herself one small moment of hope. She didn't say anything. She simply placed the note carefully into her book, like it mattered. The cafe Maria chose months later was small, quiet, and ordinary in the best way. No chandeliers, no crowd, no performance. Just soft music, clean tables, and sunlight spilling across the floor like a gentle reminder that life continues. Clifford arrived early, not to impress, but because he didn't want Maria waiting. He wore a simple shirt, no flashy watch, no forced confidence. He sat with both hands around a cup of tea, breathing slowly, the way Dr. Harris had taught him when anxiety tried to drive. When Maria walked in, Clifford stood immediately. Maria raised a hand slightly. You don't have to do that. Clifford paused, then sat back down. Okay. Maria sat across from him, placing her purse on the chair beside her. She looked composed, not distant. There was a difference. Clifford swallowed. Thank you for meeting me. Maria nodded. I'm here because I want clarity. Clifford's chest tightened. Me too. A waitress approached and Maria ordered tea. When the waitress left, silence settled between them, less sharp than before, more honest. Clifford spoke first, voice steady. I won't defend what I did. I won't explain it like it makes it smaller. I humiliated you because I wanted to feel big, and that's the truth. Maria watched him closely. And why do you think you needed to feel big? Clifford exhaled slowly. Because I felt small most of my life. And instead of healing that light, I built a mask that needed applause. Maria's eyes stayed calm, and the mask made you cruel. Clifford nodded. Yes. Maria took a slow sip of tea. What has changed? Clifford chose his words carefully. I'm still capable of the same instincts. They haven't disappeared, but now I recognize them. I don't feed them. I'm learning to sit with discomfort instead of turning it into control. Maria studied him. Give me an example. Clifford nodded. At work, I stopped exaggerating my contributions. I started crediting people, even when it made me feel invisible, and I realized visibility isn't the same as value. Maria's gaze sharpened slightly, like she was checking for performance. And at home? Clifford's throat tightened. At home, I stopped expecting you to manage my emotions. I stopped asking you to comfort me just because I feel guilty. I'm trying to carry my own growth. Maria's face remained steady, but her eyes held something softer. And what do you want from me now? Clifford hesitated, then answered honestly. I want the chance to rebuild. But I'm not asking you to return to who you were. I'm asking for the chance to show you who I'm becoming. Maria looked away briefly, watching sunlight on the table. When she spoke, her voice was quiet. Clifford, I'm not ready to return to the marriage as it was. Clifford nodded. I understand. Maria continued, but I'm open to rebuilding trust slowly, carefully, with boundaries. Clifford's breath released shakily. Thank you. Maria raised her hand slightly again. Don't turn this into a celebration. This is not a reward. It's a process. Clifford nodded immediately. You're right. I won't rush it. Maria's gaze returned to him. If we rebuild, it will be on respect, not fear, not appearances. Clifford swallowed. Yes. They talked longer than either expected, not about work deals or status, but about ordinary things. Maria's mentorship program, Clifford's volunteering, the books she had started reading again, the childhood memories he was finally brave enough to discuss. The conversation wasn't romantic. It was real. When they stood to leave, Clifford didn't reach for her hand. He didn't try to claim closeness he hadn't earned. He simply walked beside her, matching her pace as if learning how to be present without ownership. Months later, Whitmore Holdings hosted another formal gala. This time, Maria's name was printed clearly on the program as host and keynote speaker. Guests arrived with the same polished smiles, the same expensive perfume, the same hunger for relevance. Clifford attended too, but not as a man chasing attention. He sat quietly among the crowd, dressed simply, posture calm. When Maria walked on stage, the room shifted toward her like gravity. She spoke with the same composure, the same steady strength. She didn't mention Clifford. She didn't need to. Her dignity didn't require public proof. Clifford watched her with a quiet pride that didn't come from being associated with her, but from finally understanding what it meant to honor someone without trying to own their shine. When the applause rose,